The wind carried the smell of dust and wild sage across the valley as the sun dipped behind the far hills. Evening poured gold over the small town of Willow Creek, where life moved slow and folks measured a person's worth by the calluses on their hands and the size of their heart, or so they liked to claim. But when Sarah Jane stepped off the stagecoach that April evening, holding a single suitcase and wearing a dress that strained across her hips, the looks she got from the townsfolk told another story. She'd come from Kansas City, answering a mail-order bride advertisement pinned to a church notice board. It promised a good life, honest work, and a home with a widowed rancher seeking companionship. What it didn't promise was kindness. As she walked the short stretch of road to the general store, whispers followed her like burrs on a skirt. "Mercy, she's a big one," someone muttered. "She'll eat him out of house and home," another snickered. Sarah kept her chin high. She'd learned long ago that people always talked louder when they felt small inside. Inside the general store, the air smelled of coffee, flour, and men's laughter. Mr. Hobbs, the owner, gave her a polite nod. "You the new bride comin' for Mr. McAllister's ranch?" "Yes, sir," she said softly. "He sent word for me to meet him here." A boy by the barrels of oats snickered. "He must be mighty desperate." The laughter stung, but Sarah only smiled. "Maybe," she said, "but desperate folks tend to be the kindest. They know what it's like to go without." When she turned, she saw him, Eli McAllister, leaning in the doorway, tall as a pine, shoulders broad from years of ranch work. His hat shaded gray eyes that seemed to study the world rather than judge it. Yet his expression was unreadable as he looked her over. "So," he said slowly, "you're the woman who wrote me about cookin'?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, hands tight on her bag. "I may not be much to look at, but I can cook for 100 and make pie enough to soothe any heartache." A chuckle rippled through the store. Sarah felt her cheeks flame but held his gaze. Eli's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "Reckon we'll see about that." Outside, he helped her into the wagon without a word. The ride to his ranch stretched over miles of open grass and rust-colored earth. The silence between them was heavy but not cruel. He'd lost his wife 3 winters ago, she'd been told. Folks said he barely spoke since. She glanced at him, the scar on his jaw catching the last light. This was a man who'd weathered storms far worse than gossip. When they reached the ranch, the sky had turned indigo. The house stood proud but lonely, windows glowing faintly. Eli unloaded her suitcase, set it by the porch, and said, "You can take the spare room. We'll talk in the mornin'. Supper's in the pot if you're hungry." She nodded. "Thank you, Mr. McAllister. Eli's fine," he muttered before heading to the barn. Inside, Sarah found stew simmering on the stove, bland, watery, sad. She smiled to herself, rolled up her sleeves, and went to work. By the time Eli returned, the kitchen smelled of garlic, pepper, and warmth. She'd thickened the stew, baked cornbread from scratch, and brewed coffee dark as midnight. He paused in the doorway, surprised. "You done all that in an hour?" "Yes, sir. My mama used to say a woman's hands can speak kindness when words fail." He tasted the stew, then the cornbread. For a moment his face softened, like ice cracking in spring. "Ain't had food taste like this since before," he stopped himself. "Since before your wife passed," Sarah finished gently. "I'm sorry for your loss." He only nodded and ate in silence, but when he was done, he said quietly, "You can stay." Days turned into weeks. Sarah rose before dawn, baking bread while the stars still blinked above the hills. She cleaned, mended, and tended the small herb garden behind the house. At first Eli kept to his fields, wordless and distant, but she noticed small things, the way he lingered by the kitchen door to smell the air, the faint curve of his mouth when she sang while kneading dough. Once, he asked shyly, "You always sing when you cook?" "Only when I'm happy," she said. He looked down. "Then I guess I've been feeding your happiness lately." Still, the town hadn't softened. At church socials, women whispered that Eli had settled for the big one who could cook. Sarah smiled through it all, though sometimes tears burned her eyes in the dark. Eli seemed to hear the whispers too. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset bleed red across the plains, he said, "You hear what folks say?" "I do," she replied. "Does it bother you?" "Used to. Not anymore. I figure, if a person's mouth is busy speaking poison, at least they ain't eatin' my pie." He laughed, really laughed, for the first time she'd heard. The sound was deep and rough, like gravel giving way to water. Something shifted between them then, something gentle and dangerous all at once. Summer came early that year. The ranch flourished under their shared work. Eli taught her to ride, to rope, even to fire a rifle. She taught him to season food and to let silence mean comfort, not distance. One morning, after branding cattle under the blazing sun, Eli slumped on the porch steps, exhausted. Sarah brought lemonade, her apron streaked with flour. "You look like the sun wrestled you and won," she teased. "Maybe," he said, smiling faintly. "But I'd take that fight again if it meant comin' home to your cookin'." Her heart fluttered, though she hid it with a laugh. "Careful, sir. Compliments like that can spoil a woman faster than cream in July. Then maybe you deserve a little spoilin'." That night, as thunder rolled in the distance, Sarah couldn't sleep. She thought about how far she'd come. From a girl mocked for her size to a woman who built warmth where there had been cold. She rose, went to the window, and saw Eli out by the corral, rain starting to fall. She grabbed a shawl and stepped outside. "What are you doing out here?" she called. "Thinkin'," he said, "'bout how folks judge what they see instead of what keeps a person alive." She joined him, raindrops catching in her hair. "And what keeps you alive, Eli McAllister?" He looked at her, rain running down his face. "The smell of bread at dawn. The sound of someone singin' when they think no one listens. The feelin' that home ain't just a roof but a heartbeat." Her breath caught. "And do you think you've found that heartbeat?" He reached up, brushed a wet curl from her cheek. "Reckon I might have." Lightning split the sky, and in that flash they saw each other. Not the widow and the fat girl, but two souls carved by loneliness, daring to hope again. The storm broke, but they didn't move. The rain was warm, washing away every cruel word the world had ever thrown their way. The next morning, Eli hitched the wagon. "We're goin' to town," he said. Sarah blinked. "What for?" "Got somethin' needs sayin' in front of folks who been sayin' plenty themselves." The sky over Willow Creek was bright and cruelly clear that morning, the kind of blue that made dust look sharper and whispers travel farther. Eli McAllister drove the wagon down Main Street while Sarah sat beside him, her hands folded tight in her lap. The reins creaked, the horses snorted, and heads began to turn. People paused outside the post office, on porches, in the doorway of the saloon. Word moved faster than wind. The rancher's bringing his bride to town. Eli pulled up in front of the same general store, where Sarah had first stepped off the coach. He helped her down, his calloused hand steady under hers. She wanted to pull away. She could already feel the eyes crawling over her, but he didn't let go. He led her straight to the wooden steps, turned, and faced the gathering crowd. "Morning," he said, his voice even but carrying clear across the street. "Reckon most of you know who I am. Eli McAllister. Some of you been askin' about the woman who's been cookin' up a storm at my place these past months. This here's Sarah Jane McAllister." A murmur rolled through the onlookers. He went on, eyes fixed on them, not angry but unflinching. "And before another whisper crawls its way across this town, let me set a few things straight. Folks said I was desperate when I sent for her. Maybe I was. Desperate for peace, for a good meal, for a reason to laugh again. But I sure as heaven ain't desperate now. I'm proud." Sarah blinked up at him. She hadn't expected that word. Eli continued, "This woman works from dawn till the stars come out. She keeps my ranch alive, keeps me alive, and feeds half the hands that pass through my gate. If any of you think you can measure her worth by the inches of her waist instead of the size of her heart, you don't know what makes a home. A silence spread, uneasy, but clean. Then, from the back, Mrs. Hobbs stepped forward clutching a pie dish, cheeks red. "Eli McAllister, that's the finest thing I ever heard a man say," she declared. The tension broke. People started nodding, some smiling, a few clapping. The whispering stopped. Sarah felt heat rise behind her eyes. She turned to him. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, Mom," he said softly, "I surely did. There's been too much quiet shame in both our lives." He tipped his hat to the crowd, then to her. "Come on, Mrs. McAllister. Let's get us some sugar for that pie you promised." They spent the rest of the morning walking the boardwalks, hand in hand like any married pair. No one laughed now. Even the store boys who'd once mocked her nodded respectfully. Sarah carried that feeling home like sunlight in her pockets. That evening the ranch glowed gold again. The cattle lowed in the far pastures. The scent of baking bread drifted through the open windows. Eli sat at the table, watching her pull a roast from the oven. "You sure you ain't some kind of miracle worker?" he teased. She smiled. "Only miracle I ever made is turnin' flour and worry into supper." "Well, it's enough for me." They ate quietly, comfortable in the hum of crickets outside. Afterward, Eli poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. "Sarah," he began, then paused as if the words weighed more than the mug. "I used to think I'd had my share of love. Thought it was a one-time gift, and when it was gone, that was that. But you came along, singing in my kitchen, laughing at my dry jokes, and it felt like the good Lord gave me another sunrise." She looked down, tears shining in her lashes. "You don't have to say that." He reached across the table, rough fingers brushing her wrist. "I ain't saying it, 'cause I have to. I'm saying it, 'cause it's true. You brought the sound of life back to this place. And I don't reckon I ever thanked you proper." She covered his hand with hers. "You already did. This morning, in town. That was more than enough." Outside, the wind shifted. A storm was coming again, low thunder rolling from the hills. Eli rose, went to the door, and looked out across the darkening fields. "Seems storms follow us," he said. "Maybe they come to test what we've built," she replied, standing beside him. "Then let 'em. We've weathered worse." The rain hit hard but warm, splattering against the porch rail. Sarah laughed and stepped out. Into it, arms wide. Eli followed, shaking his head. "You're gonna catch cold." "Maybe," she called over the rain, "but it feels too good to hide from." He watched her twirl once, the lamplight catching her wet hair, her face alive with joy. In that moment, he saw not a mail-order bride, not a woman measured by others, but the heart of his home. He stepped forward, caught her hand, and kissed her, gentle first, then certain. When they finally broke apart, the rain had softened to a hush. "Sarah Jane McAllister," he whispered, "you turned my house into a life. And if anyone ever says again that no one marries a fat girl, well, they'll have to answer to a rancher who did, and never regretted a day of it." She laughed through tears. "That's quite a reply, sir." "Not half as good as your cookin'," he said, pulling her close.